All right. So I took a break so long, the sun went down. I ate dinner. Hopefully, you guys did too, or did something and got a little bit of a break. And we're going to close out the second half of chapter 15. Here it comes. Let's go on and share my screen so we can check that out. All right. So we stopped. Let me. We stopped on this here slide right here that talks about the different Latin American nation building that was happening between 1750 and 1850. So let's go on to the other South American revolutions. Just talked about Brazil, just talked about Mexico. So what else was happening in South America between 1750 and 1850? So we're going to see the independence from Spain and Spanish America was more prolonged and militarized than the American independence from Britain. So that's a comparison right there. So what's happening with the Spanish interaction in Spanish America and in South America, it's more prolonged, more violent, and more militarized than what happens with the United States and their interaction with Great Britain. And that can kind of be, let's just think about it. So the US, most of those people who are like advocating for, their freedom or, their independence are going to be, white educated people. This revolution, as well as a lot of the other revolutions, are going to start from kind of the lower rungs of population that are not as educated, usually not as white, and therefore, unfortunately, usually attacked a bit more. So in Venezuela, we have a man named Simon Bolivar, and also in Argentina, we have Jose de San Martin, who's going to wage extended wars for independence against Spain between 1810 and 1824. So in that early portion of the 1800s, we're going to see Venezuela and Argentina are going to fight for their independence. And even we're going to see so much reverence and respect given to Simon Bolivar that he's going to get a country named after him called Bolivia in South America as well. The political revolution happening against the Spanish colonial authorities is escalated into a social struggle among Indians, mestizos, who are going to be the mix between Native American people and European settlers, slaves, and whites. So or whites are gonna also be known as Creoles too. So we're gonna see a civil war over the new colonial order. So who's gonna be in control? Is it gonna be the natives who have always been there? Is it gonna be the mestizos who are the mixture of the two, of European and native blood? Is it gonna be the slaves who are, responsible for a lot of the labor needs in South America during this time period, or is it gonna be the whites because they have European ancestry and blood? Next up, debating over forming new Latin American confederations or national republics. So, what is it going to look like? Is it going to be a confederation of countries? Is it going to be a republic where people are, kind of voting for things? What is that going to look like in South America? Are we going to emphasize democracy? Are we going to emphasize, what's going to be emphasized in terms of leading these areas? And so, Bolivar is going to advocate for a Latin American confederation. So, a kind of a loosely organized group of these Latin American states. And next up, we're going to see local identities. Local identities are going to prevail with unstable national republics. So once again, those cultures that had been there previously are going to be embraced and still thriving as they try to kind of create these struggling, unstable national republics that even to this day in certain South American nations are seen as struggling or unstable, excuse me. So the new national republics were controlled by military chieftains and landed wealthy elites. So once again, even though we have this enlightenment happening, once again, this enlightenment is not happening for everyone is not reaping the benefits of said enlightenment. It is still going to the military or to the wealthy people, or just not to the peasants or to the common person. So yes, there's revolution happening, but the hypocrisy is that this freedom is not happening for everyone. And as we kind of go around from place to place, we're kind of seeing how it's not free, it's not happening, and they're saying we're getting freedom, but in actuality, still only certain populations are being freed. All right, so what's going to happen now? So let's go on and leave South America and let's go on and head a bit east and head into Africa. So if we head east, it's going to be like towards the right side. So that's going to be the change in trade in Africa. So we're going to see increased domestic and world trade, especially the Atlantic slave trade, shifted the terms of state building. All right, so by North America and South America becoming more prevalent in the trading world for like the first time really heavily during this time period, it's going to shift how much Africa is also going to influence or be influenced by the trading over in those areas as well, because the west coast of Africa is right next to South America and not too far from, or it's pretty far, but anyway, not too bad from North America as well. So the abolition of the slave trade. So the slave trade became a subject of fierce debate in the late 18th century to the late 1700s, even as it enriched and empowered many Europeans and some Africans. So it says some Africans. So one thing that you guys have to realize is that slavery has always been around in some capacity, in some form. We talked about it in previous times, how it was happening in Eastern Africa, how it was happening in the Slavic regions of Europe and things like that. So let's think about this a little bit more. So some argue that that slave labor is going to be less productive than free wage labor. So if you pay people, they have more of an incentive to work quicker, work better, work harder, work more efficiently than if you're forcing them to do things where they can like drag their feet and things like that. Others are going to argue that trafficking in slaves is going to be immoral. So it's against everything that a lot of these European nations profess, that they claim that they identify with, including freedom, liberty, justice, equality amongst all. And then we also are going to see certain groups that are going to advocate or abolitionists who are going to advocate for the ending of slavery, including the Quakers in both England and the US, who are going to lobby to end the slave trade. Let's keep on going a little bit further with the abolition of the slave trade. So abolitionists achieved success in prohibiting the slave trade. So let's talk about some of these successes that we're going to see. So Denmark is going to be one of the first. They're going to ban the slave trade in its Caribbean colonies in 1803. So by banning the slave trade, I mean the trading of slaves that are coming from Africa, not slavery, but the banning of trading slaves. So you can still have slaves in your country. You just can't purchase them or get them from Africa. That's going to be the first one. Next up, we're going to see Great Britain is going to ban it in 1807, and the US is going to ban it the next year in 1808. And then over time, France and other European governments are going to be persuaded. And one way they're going to be persuaded is because Great Britain is going to use their navy to basically block off parts of West Africa to prevent the slave trade from happening above the equator. So if you want to take the long route and go south and go around, then it might happen. But if you want to go north and go the easy route into the Caribbean or South America or North America, it ain't happening under the British naval watch. So then that's going to say by the 1850s, the number of slaves traded, not the number of slaves that are held, is going to drop significantly. So slavery is not going to end for several more decades due to the probability of cotton in the southern parts of the US, sugar in the Caribbean, and coffee in Brazil. So originally in Brazil, in the Caribbean, they're going to have incredibly rough slave trades or slavery, where people or slaves are not going to, or enslaved people are not going to survive more than like 3 to 7 years because of how harsh the conditions are. The US is going to quickly realize that they should go towards all right. And so once again, in the Caribbean and Brazil, it's going to be a really incredibly rough form of slavery. But in the US, they're going to realize very quickly that, hey, it's more profitable for us to kind of create, unfortunately, breeding types of slavery where they're breeding slaves in really negative ways. They're going to, deal with the abuse and the sexual assault of lots of enslaved women to continue slavery by producing slaves through sexual assault and things like that. All right, so we're going to see new trade with Africa. So the new trade with Africa, the European traders are going to promote a new form of commerce, a legitimate trade. So Europeans wanted Africans to substitute trade in produce for trade enslaved. So we're going to see West Africans are going to begin to export palm oil, peanuts, and vegetable oils in order to kind of get these needs accomplished. And so we're going to see a lot of environmental degradation happening during this time period. Even still, in Africa, a lot of environmental degradation happens in the pursuit of profits for European and even Asian nations to this day. The new generation of successful West African merchants amassed really huge amounts of money. I'm going to skip over them. They're not necessarily as important, but we're going to see definitely that lots of money is going to be acquired. All right, so slavery in Africa. So the rise of free labor in the Atlantic world, dwindling foreign slave trade actually strengthened slavery in Africa. So there's going to be, as I said previously, a lot of slavery actually happening in Africa that people are not necessarily cognizant of during this time period. Previously, I said they're going to work in palm oil plantations and things like that, or in the military forces as well. They're not going to work as domestics as they did in American slavery. All right. So North Nigeria at one point in time is going to have more slaves than Brazil and almost as many as the US during this time period. All right. And Africa, for one point in time, is going to be the largest slaveholding continent around. All right, so let's make a shift. We're leaving slave-free, we're leaving the revolutions, and we're talking about the economic changes that are about to occur and that are occurring because of the industrious and the industrial revolution that are coming up. So economic reordering. Until the mid 18th century, societies mostly produced for their own subsistence. So we're not going to have this mass producing manufacturing culture. We're going to see surpluses are going to enter the trade economy, but they're not going to translate to their own society. So we're going to see surpluses arising, but they're not really going to influence how much money a whole society has. Maybe how much an owner has, but not how much a whole society has. And then drop on down. By the mid 19th century, people are going to increasingly work to produce goods that they could sell. So here goes our industrious revolution, and that's going to begin in Northwest Europe and also in British North America. So entire families are going to begin to work harder and longer hours to produce and purchase more in the marketplace. That is a cultural and shift and development in world history. So people are no longer going to be in the home. They're going to focus on working outside of the home, working harder, longer hours to get more money, to buy more things, to have a better life. So we're going to see less time is going to be devoted to leisure and more time to working. They're going to use their additional income to improve their standards of living and buy different things or better beds or whatever you're trying to improve during this time period, you're going to improve it. So beginning during the second half of the 17th century, gaining momentum in the 18th century is going to lay the foundations for the industrial revolution of the late 18th century and the early 19th century. All right, still an industrious revolution. So what we're going to see? We're going to see rising consumption is going to, by working class families, going to lead to an expansion in trade, including the amount of silver and sugar that is going to be produced and used by certain products, and also certain staples like tea. So having access to that is going to, or the ability to buy those things is going to change how hard people are going to work. That's going to trickle down from elites to ordinary people, and people, including slaves and laborers, are going to be able to use their meager wages to buy imported cloths that usually from things they had previously picked. So they're going to pick the cotton, get paid for it. They're going to turn that cotton into thread. And that thread is going to be turned into fabric, and that fabric is going to then be turned into textile. That textile is then going to be resold to the people who just picked the cotton. All right, so hopefully you guys understand the process of creating thread and how it used to be super time consuming and things like that. All right, so we're going to see the manufacturing, we're going to see an expansion of trade, means that traders are going to need new services. So you're going to see an expansion of the middle class and expansion of the different jobs that are available, including now you need insurance. So I got to make sure that my goods get to where they're going. And if they don't get to where they're going, I need to get paid for them things. Also bookkeeping. So how you're going to count your book and record your legal documents, all those things are going to expand over time. You're going to need more accountants, more lawyers to protect yourselves. So once again, we're going to see an expanding of the middle class and different jobs are going to proliferate as well. So and that also means we're going to see a rising of different classes too. One of them is going to be called the bourgeoisie. That's going to be your urban businessmen, your financiers, and other property owners without aristocratic origins. So those who work their way up through business to get their wealth and their money are going to be the bourgeoisie, and they're going to be seen above your middle class. So everything is going to be expanding during this time period, all of the different economic levels or categories. All right, the Industrial Revolution. So a gradual buildup of technical and a gradual buildup of technical knowledge, invention, and application and diffusion allow for the emergence of manufacturing. The Industrial Revolution is going to begin in Britain for a whole bunch of reasons. Number one, Britain has a bunch of canals that can move goods very rapidly, and they can also use these waterways to power the eventual steam engine that's coming in the future. They're going to have a large accessible source of coal and iron ore, which is really important to manufacturing and eventually the steam engine. They're going to have an effective system for mobilizing capital investment, banking, marketplaces, stock markets. They're going to be able to use steam power from their coal to power textile production and eventually a whole bunch of other factories. And they're going to have access to colonial colonies and source of financial investment, raw materials, and markets for manufacturing goods. So because they got so many colonies around the world, they can produce and get a whole bunch of stuff that maybe other places are not going to get. And that's why Great Britain is seen at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And so who are the important people? We have James Watt. He's going to be important. He's going to be known as the father of the Industrial Revolution. Think about the kilowatts in your light bulbs and things like that. That's after, that dude right there. So James Watt. And having the steam engine is going to revolutionize transportation and how people are able to move around goods and also people more effectively. So textile is going to change. We're going to have a lot of cotton coming from the southern parts of the US, also from Egypt, also from India. And so we're going to see lots of those things being produced in British colonial areas. And there's going to be another person named Eli Whitney. He's going to produce what we now know as what is known as the cotton gin. The cotton gin is going to be something that pulls the seeds out of cotton. Some of you may not have seen natural cotton, but natural cotton, it looks like a cotton ball, but it has these thin, pointy black seeds that they really hurt to kind of pull them out, and they're really hard to get out of cotton. So he is credited with creating an invention that is going to pull those seeds out with very little labor force needed. I have a belief that he probably maybe wasn't the person who came up with the idea of it, because honestly, why would he be coming up with the idea of it if he is not the one who's out there picking cotton? It doesn't quite make any sense to me, but what do I know? All right. And so also we're going to see that because of Eli Whitney's invention, the cotton boom is going to happen in the US. So the US is going to produce about 80+% of the cotton that's produced in the world by 1850, which is going to further proliferate or further stop people from wanting to abolish slavery in the southern parts of the US. All right, so we're going to see that people who industrialize are going to outdistance their rivals a lot, period. So if you're Great Britain, you're going to be ahead of everybody else. If you're the US, you're going to be ahead of everybody else. If you're eventually Japan and Russia, you're going to be ahead of everyone else in that area, because you're going to industrialize quicker and more swifter. All right, so the reach of the Industrial Revolution. So why didn't China become the center of the Industrial Revolution? Something that it might have actually been, because China is going to have over 300 million people during this time period. So they're going to have to mass produce something. But the reason why they're not going to be credited with it is because they're not going to foster experimental science of this kind, and great minds are going to be put into bureaucracy. So they're not going to let their great minds think for themselves. They're going to be used for governmental purposes, and also for science. Or outside science or experimental science is not really going to be embraced. Next up, they're also not going to support overseas expansion and outside ideas or the trade that's going to help to kind of revolutionize the Atlantic world. So they're going to be like, yo, bro, we cool. We straight over here. We got everything we need. We don't really need you guys. And it's going to lead to their downfall in a few short slides. All right, historically, Europe had a trade imbalance with Eurasia, where Europe is going to be the little sibling who is getting abused. I oftentimes like to think about the history that is coming up now as kind of like the the childhood or the elementary school history, where you have the younger sibling who's been bullied and picked on for a very long time, who is now much taller than their younger sibling, than their older sibling, excuse me. And so because they're younger, but they're older, they're looking down on their sibling and they're like, remember when you was picking on me? I got you, no worries. And so once again, we're going to see that imbalance is going to shift, where Europe is going to be that bigger bullying sibling this time. So with the economic order, Europe had both manufactured commodities and capital to export. And then next up, we're going to see the Ottoman Empire is still around. It's still hanging on, and it's going to still hang around to the 1900s. But they're going to end up being one of Europe's biggest debtors. They're going to owe a lot of money. So let's talk about the Industrial Revolution happening around 1850. So let's look at what's happening in Western Europe. So let's look at Great Britain first, or the United Kingdom. All this green is going to be all the railroads that have happened in 1850. So that's a lot. You can go pretty much everywhere. People can move everywhere. Goods can move everywhere. And then you got waterways on top of all that. All right. And then you can also see the different colors. So people living in this brown area are going to be people who live, like 20% of the people living in this area are going to live in big cities with over 100,000 people or more. If you're in this orange portion, you're going to have 6 to 10% of the population are going to live in cities with 100,000 people or more. And then, that's just less than 5% live in big cities, period. Okay. But you can see how the spread by the 1850s of industrialization, just by the spread of railroads and also these different deposits being exported, and also the city of industry, the centers of industry, by these little boxes that are popping up all throughout these areas. All right. All right, so social and cultural impact, the working and living. Industrial impact brought more demanding working routines. So we're going to see manufactured economies of Western Europe and North America, and farms and plantations in Asia and Africa. So we're going to see, once again, more manufacturing, more fair and equitable free labor happening for European Americans or Europeans in general, and then more farms and plantations happening in Africa and Asia. So more exploitive or exploitation happening in both sides, but more physically abusive labor happening in Asia and Africa. So urban life and work routines, how is it going to change? What's going to happen? So we're going to see that urbanization, those formation of cities, and cities are going to be absolutely freaking disgusting. No running water, no clean water, no sewer systems, no garbage. And there's going to be lots of disease, lots of animals, rodents running around, just, oof. And there's no laws, because they didn't have to have laws before these times. Like, governments don't have to have laws about how you build things or how you clean things, because they never had them before. So another change in society, you have to have a government that's strong enough to build these laws and know what issues are out there. So work is going to change from seasonal rhythm to rigid concepts of time and work disciplines. Employers are going to use clocks to ring workers in on break and out long, exhausting days, and they're going to have pretty crappy wages. So previously, the seasonal rhythm, you would plant your crops, you'd water them, you'd make sure everything was good, you'd harvest them, and then you're chilling. And even then, you're not working 8 hours a day. You might work maybe like 4 or 5, and then you're going back inside the house, if that. Now you're working 16, 20 hours a day. And if you're a woman, you might even work a lot more hours with your family. So it's a big change in society. Whereas previously, as I said previously, before industrial revolution, people are chilling at home on their farms. So what social and cultural impacts are going to happen as we continue on? So we're going to see people are going to protest, and we're going to see a lot of immigration with an E. So immigration with an I means you're coming in. Immigration with an E means you're going out. So the effects of the revolution of working class families raise widespread concern. So, oh my goodness, the kids, they need their parents. What's going to happen? In the 1810s, we're going to see people are going to basically kind of rise up against machines and say that, if you have machines, you don't need people. And that's still been a big debate today. So if we have more machines, do we need less people? Social advocates are going to seek to protect legislation like curbing child labor, because they was using plenty of kids back then. They're small. You can pay them less, and you can stick their fingers into places to unjam machines, even if it might cause them to be harmed later on. They're going to limit the amount of hours per day. So instead of you working 16, how about you only work like 10 or 8, maybe not as many. And they're also going to legalize prostitution for the sake of the prostitutes, so there's less abuse happening as well. And with that, we're going to see people are going to flee or go out of Europe and go to other parts of the world, including the Americas, Canada, and Australia, on these so-called coffin ships. All right. And so we're going to see, as I said previously, on all the other parts, hypocrisy. So a lot more wealth flowing, but everyone does not have access to that wealth. That laissez-faire only works if you got money. If you ain't got no money, you still broke. Moving on. All right, persistence and change in Afro-Eurasia. So what we're going to see, Western Europe's military might, technological advancements, and economic strength was a threat to the remaining Afro-Eurasian empires. They're finna come crumbling down. Merchants and industrialists sought closer and political ties in the name of gaining free access to the region's markets. And rulers in Russia, the Ottoman Empire, India, China, all sought to borrow from Western Europe's ideas and institutions. So Russia was like, I know that we're a little bit late, but as they get their political strength together, they're going to borrow these ideas because they make sense. The Ottoman Empire realized that they've gotten left behind. India, China, those three places know they've been left behind, and they must revolutionize and change quickly and embrace these Western ideas and institutions, or they will be completely left behind. Russia, let's go on to talk about Russia. So as I said previously, Russia's going to revamp their monarchy, get their politics in order. They're going to strengthen their traditional authority through modest reforms and suppression of domestic oppression. So the people are like, yeah, we might want democracy. It sounds like a good idea. And Russia's like, nah, you don't want democracy, and chill out. So we're going to see after Napoleon's invasions are going to fail in 1812, the French Revolution and their armies are going to strike their heart at the Russian political institutions. So Napoleon's going to fail, but the ideas persist: equality, freedom, fraternity, all that stuff. So when Alexander I is going to die in 1825, there's going to be a question over who's going to succeed him. Is it going to be a constitutional monarchy, or is it going to be a republic? What's going to happen? So Nicholas II, who's going to come in, is going to squash all that and be like, chill out, monarchy persist. So he's going to project his authority by talking about the embodiment of the nation. He is the nation. He is, that nationalistic quality that we've been talking about in the beginning of this video. He's also going to make sure that he keeps the people, under watch at all times. He's going to have a secret police system that's going to root out opposition. So if you're talking strange, you're going to find out about it and you're going to die. All right, he's going to enforce censorship because he doesn't want books out there that might give people different ideas or ideas about what government could look like outside of the monarchy. And also the military is going to be incredibly strong, and it still is today in Russia. He's going to maintain that serfdom where, these serfs are going to, farm for the government and, not really have a chance to succeed or get out of that caste. By the 1830s, he's going to preach a conservative philosophy stressing faith, hierarchy, and obedience. Reforms in the Ottoman Empire, and my goodness, we are rapidly approaching the end. Look at us, check us out. So the Ottoman Empire, we're going to see these reforms happening. So in Egypt and the Ottoman, so the Ottoman is going to be shaken by Napoleon's invasion of Egypt. And we're going to see it's going to be part of the Ottoman Empire during this time period. And reformist energies are going to sweep through Egypt to the center of the Ottoman Empire. So some of the reforms that are going to happen, this dude named Muhammad Ali, not the boxer, but a guy known as the father of Egypt, is going to kind of look to France, like a lot of other places are, for revolutionary thought and ideas. So that's like South America. That's, looking at the Ottoman Empire, looking at so many other places that I'm drawing a blank on right now are going to look to France, and their revolution for change and things like that. All right, so once again, we have Muhammad Ali. So looking to France, he's going to reform education and agriculture by looking at European ideals and bringing those in and helping them with Egypt. He's going to transform Egypt as a major cotton exporter. So cotton is we still have really good Egyptian cotton that comes from Egypt. He's going to also construct a series of dams and also deepen irrigation canals. And eventually we're going to see the Suez Canal that's going to pop up and help to rapidize or speed transportation into Afro-Eurasia. All right, and so we're going to see reforms are going to transform Egypt into the most powerful state in Eastern Mediterranean. It's going to alarm the Ottoman Empire and European powers. European merchants are going to desire free access to Egyptian marketplaces. All right, so here we go. So continuing on with these reforms in the Ottoman Empire. So pressure from Egypt, from Europe is going to persuade the Ottoman rulers to reform. Either you reform or you get left behind. So in 1807, the Janissaries are going to overthrow Sultan Selim, and they're going to form an alliance with clerical scholars to thwart reformers. So the reason why you want to be aligned with scholars is because you can kind of control the educational narrative that's being produced as people learn to read and as literacy flourishes more. All right, so the Ottomans are the opponents. To the Ottomans are going the opponents to the Ottoman reform are going to be powerful, but the Ottoman authority is going to depend on the clerical support. The Ottoman rulers did not seek popular support. Like, I don't care what you got to say as long as the religious community supports me. And all right, so let's go on and move forward. So what other changes are we going to see? So we're going to see European advisors are going to create a modern army, a medical college, and a military school for strengthening their army. We're going to see schools are going to teach European languages and sciences. And also we're going to see legislation that's going to guarantee equality for people, regardless for your religion. If you're not Muslim, you're Christian or whatever, you're still going to be treated equally in the Ottoman Empire. So hypocrisy, here it comes. So the reforms are not going to be completely revolutionary because they rely on the personal whims of the rulers. So if the rulers are having a bad day or a bad time, then the people will be too. Bureaucratic and religious infrastructures are going to be committed to old ways. So there's not going to be any revolutionary thought happening. I want you guys to think about this. Have I talked about religion in North America? Have I talked about religion really heavily in Europe? Have I talked about religion really heavily in South America? Have I talked about religion really heavily in a lot of places? So religion is not being focused on as heavily, and I'm not sure that has been emphasized a lot. But religion is not going to be focused on as heavily. But in certain parts of the world, it still is. All right, landed interests are going to resist rule sector reform. Excuse me. Merchants are going to profit from debt-ridden sultans, and they're going to prevent the empire's fiscal collapse through financial support to the state. So the merchants are going to be the ones who support the government and not necessarily the people or the tax dollars to make it really revolutionary and really for the people and by the people. So once again, the Ottoman, like a lot of other places, is hypocritical in their expansion, in their reform. British India and the company rule. So for the first time, we're going to see a combination between the British government and the merchants, and they're going to create these companies that are going to be pretty evil, pretty despicable, and really designed to extract wealth and resources out of places. All right, so the British colonial reordering in India. So in British India, the Europe's most important and profitable colonial possession is going to be Asia from 1750 through 1850. The British-led changes in Asia did not lead to political independence. So in a lot of places, they had revolutions and got their freedom, not in Asia, not for a while at least. So India is going to increasingly be dominated by the English East India Company. That's that governmental merchant-based company that's going to thrive and arise during this time period. So it's going to be chartered by the British Crown in the 1600s, and it's going to control India's imports and exports. And it's going to contradict Britain's claims of a free trade. So everyone is free, laissez-faire, unless you're one of their colonies who has a bunch of brown people who they can dominate and control because brown people don't know how to control themselves, supposedly. So let's talk about the monopoly. So Great Britain is going to be able to control all of the trading posts, and it's going to take, so basically they're going to take all of the trading posts and not take political control, at least in the beginning. After that, they're going to conquer Bengal in 1759, and the company and British colonial rulers are going to get a lot of money extracted via taxes and keep a portion for their personal fortunes. So some of the colonial rulers who are living in India from Great Britain are going to be responsible for taxing the Indians, and that money is going to go partially to Great Britain, but also partially to enrich those colonial rulers. So that company, the India East India Company, is going to grant the rights to collect taxes and trade of free duties to a Mughal emperor who got annual pension. So they're including a few people from India in the kind of the Ponzi scheme or the pyramid scheme to pull and extract money out of the country, unfortunately. That's going to bring most of South Asia under its rule by 1800. And once we see that, we're going to see that it's going to actually kind of have a counter effect. We're going to see Indians are going to kind of try to embrace more native traditions, their Hinduism, recover their Indian literacy and other cultural traditions to kind of offset some of the losses that they're taking by doing so much trade with European places. So let's look at British India over about a 90-year time period from 1767 to 1857. So we'll see in 1767 how the small portion of India that is under British control, 1805, an even larger portion, including kind of like that peninsula tip. And then 1857, the majority of India is going to be under British control instead, up under its own power. What are some of the effects that's going to happen? So we're going to see urbanization happening, like happening in other places, in Calcutta, Madras, Bombay, and Europeans are going to live there. A lot of them are going to live close to company forts and trading centers, with the Indians kind of living further out and so quote unquote crowded black towns or places where the minorities live. India is going to be a major importer of textiles and raw cotton, and they're also going to reverse traditional patterns of trade. So it's normally the things are coming into Asia or into Asia, excuse me, and now they're going to be kind of coming out. Wait, excuse me, hold on. India becomes an importer of British textiles. So once again, so British textiles are typically, you're gonna have Indian textiles because they're of higher quality and better quality. But now you're gonna see those things are gonna come in, and then we're gonna see an exporting of Indian cotton during this time period because Britain is going to utilize that for thread and then make textiles and then resell them in India. So once again, people are buying the products that they have previously picked. All right. British reformers and evangelicals are going to advocate for far-reaching changes in Indian culture, including an end to a sati. Satis are going to be after your husband dies, you jump in a fire and you kill yourself because your life can't go on because your husband's dead. It's like, oh my God. All right. So we're going to see Britain is going to force English to replace a lot of the cultural languages in India. So all of your education and your business has to be, and politics has to be done in English. All right, so the new British colonial rule is not going to be incredibly stable. We're going to see wealthy landowners, landlords, money lenders, peasants, and non-Hindu forest dwellers are going to, and dispossessed artisans, and lots of other people are going to revolt under the British dominated economy. So once again, people do not always go willingly to torture or to abuse and to exploitation. Let's move on into China. All right. So China is going to be pretty unaffected by European upheaval until the first Opium War. Just so you guys know, opium is going to be also grown in India and it's going to be exported into China. So Europe realized quickly that the quickest way for them to get silver is to sell drugs. That's why I can put it. And they would sell drugs. And opium is a drug like opioids. The root of that is going to be the poppy plant. People would smoke that, get incredibly inebriated, and buy it with silver, which is going to lead to a lot of silver flowing into Europe and leaving China, and a lot of drugs flowing into China and leaving India. All right, so the Qing rulers are going to keep the political and social structure from the Ming dynasty. And they're going to also expand and conquer different areas, including Taiwan, Central Asia, and Tibet. And some of these peasants are going to migrate and settle in the former frontier lands. They're going to expand out. But as this empire is going to expand, they're going to have about 300 million people during this time period. They're going to have really bad, strained resources. And so by the mid-19th century, the Chinese could no longer ignore European demands, including trading, just access to their ports, plenty of different things. So we're going to see the Opium War is going to expose China's vulnerability in a new era of European ascendancy. So let's talk about the Opium War and the opening of China. The late 18th century, opium is going to be, anyway, I talked about that. It's going to be smoked. All right, and so we're going to see the East India Company in India is going to have a monopoly on exporting opium. So they're going to we're going to trade opium for tea and silver. So once again, as I said previously, here is your connection between tea, opium, silver. We're all going to move those things, and we're going to see that the silver is going to flee out of China while drugs come into China. And so once again, silver is coming in, reversing a long-standing trend where China was amassing most of the silver, but now China is losing most of the silver. So we're going to see an emperor is going to try to cut down on the opium trade. It's going to cause the opium war because he's going to throw like a year's worth of opium into one of their rivers, going to make the Europeans or the British pretty angry, and that's going to lead to the opium war. Which is going to open up China and lead to the Treaty of Nanjing, which is going to give Britain control of Hong Kong. And it's going to force China or the Qing dynasty to pay for the war and the cost incurred by the British to fight them off to stop them from drugging the Chinese people. So China has to pay Great Britain for stopping them from drugging their people. Seems pretty messed up. All right. Anyway, so even though Britain's going to have additional rights with different treaties, they're not going to make China an official colony. So we can see the Qing Empire and the Opium War and how it's going to, different battles are going to happen, and just how much land the Qing is going to control, and different opium war battles are going to happen in all the port cities, surprisingly, which is going to lead to all these port cities being opened up for expansion. And here we are at the end, my friend, the conclusion. So from 1750 to 1850, changes wrought by politics, ideas, commerce, industry, and technology caused more economic integration of the world, and Europe's increasingly at the center. So before, Europe was not at the center, and now it is. In Europe and in the Americas, revolutions empowered new nation states and redefined hierarchies of class, gender, and color. So once again, class is expanding because you have a lot more jobs. The bourgeoisie, the middle class, all that's expanding. Gender, I guess women can have ideas, not all of them, some of them. And then also color, we're going to see what that looks like. The mestizos, the mulattoes, and how that impacts how they're taken and influenced in society. Next up, third, we talked about as well, through newly gained economic and political powers from industrialization, Europe forced Egypt, India, and China to expand trade with Europe, even to the point of colonization in these three areas. So once again, it's going to be this free trade happening in certain parts of the world, but that free trade is exploitation and the extraction of raw goods and materials. The Industrious Revolution and the Industrial Revolution were also significant forces during this time period. If you were able to industrialize, you got ahead quickly, and if you were not able to, you're still left behind to this day. And even those countries that joined the party a little bit late, like Russia, like Japan, like other places, they're going to join late, but they're also still going to be ahead of a lot of places that were never able to industrialize as rapidly. And finally, while Europe did not gain uncontested control over other peoples, there was global reordering. They're getting that power. And by the next 2 or 3 chapters, we'll see who's dominating, who's in control, and what that looks like for the world and how it continues to play a role to this day. All right, guys, thank you so much for paying attention. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you all on the next video for chapter 16. Bye.